What if the person you believe yourself to be is not actually who you really are? What if all of our stress, struggle, and disconnection come from maintaining an identity that was never truly ours to begin with? Today, my guest is Dean Graves, mental health counselor, meditation teacher, and author of the book, The Enigma of Consciousness. And together, we are going to explore the idea that every human being carries a deeper design within themselves, just waiting to be realized. Dean, thank you so much for being here and for joining me for this conversation. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. And thank you for having me, by the way, before we begin. I'm delighted to be here.
Wonderful.
My perception of myself at this point is as a messenger. In order to prepare me to become a fruitful messenger, I lived what I would simply describe as a normal life, normal schooling, and I competed in the business world until about my 50th year. And I had an awakening, which may raise an alarm bell with some of your listeners, but an awakening is a misunderstood concept. It is nothing more than that point in our lives where we become aware that all of the stuff, even though it may be providing us with conventional success, is not making us happier. And that is a strategic point in our lives which we function up to that point according to a design, and that design, as you alluded to in your introduction, is to create an identity. The identity is unique to us because we create it, but it is nothing more than a bundle of beliefs that we incorporate into a mind. It literally is our mind. Yeah. And the reason that we create this is in order to allow us to explore ourselves in relation to other people, places, and things. And the design of it is to, doesn't compel us, but it, in most cases, is inevitable, experience a lot of what we don't like. Because in order to know what we do like, we have to experience what we don't like. If all you experience is what you like, you wouldn't know what you like because you have nothing to compare it to.
That's right.
And so the identity's purpose is to trick the world into giving us more of what we like until we reach that point of awareness that we realize this isn't working. I'm not getting happier, and I've got to do something else. There's something else out there that I need to learn to do. Yeah. And actually what that does is we exist within a range of consciousness. The range of consciousness in which we exist is a very low range on the scale, but this identity allows us to explore awareness, which is what the inherent characteristic of the one infinite creator that we are tasked with learning and becoming at this range of consciousness. While we are solely promoting this identity, our awareness is directional and it is pointed outside of us. Yeah. And in order to make the modifications necessary to this identity to try to make it more efficient in getting us more of what we like, I have to watch your reactions to my identity. And so I'm very aware of the world around me with this awareness. But again, it's a false perception of self because all we're doing is trying to trick the world into giving us more of what we like. Until we have this awakening, in order to become aware that you're not happy in spite of all this, you have to, probably for the first time, invert that same awareness inside of you to become aware that you're not happy. And so that begins the process. That
Yeah.
our purpose, everyone's purpose, the purpose of creation is to explore ourselves. And so consequently, by beginning that process within a lifetime, we begin the process of healing the false perceptions that we've created in this identity, begin to heal those false perceptions of self, and consequently begin to fulfill our purpose for participating in creation. And that will go on the rest of this lifetime and all the others that we may have subsequent to this lifetime. But that is the process that we will all go through, and this awakening can happen when you're 16 or it can happen when you're 90. It doesn't matter when it happens,
That's right.
as long as it happens.
Nice. And the conditioning literally begins at birth, right?
With the first thought we process.
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, our infant processes are very simple, and the nature of our experiences are very simple, but that notwithstanding, that begins the creation of this identity.
Yeah. And then the environment we're born into, you know, you being also a mental health counselor, I'm also a mental health counselor. We likely both took the classes on development, and that process goes right up to age 7-ish or 8, where it really begins
70 or 80.
Right. It begins to get solidified. Right. And it becomes a personality, or what we call a personality. And in the language that I've used is that a lot of what we're learning in this human existence is how to overcome our personalities based on so much conditioning and so many life experiences.
Well, how to behave is part of the belief of our identity. Because if we believe if we behave a certain way, then we'll be rewarded a certain way.
Yes, a certain way.
Yeah.
Very true.
And so that's part of this identity that we create.
Yeah. And then I think people who, I like how you put how we trick the world into giving us what we like or what we want. Because that's essentially what we're doing. We're chasing what we want. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's predicated on the false assumption that the world can give us what we like.
True. And so a lot of people spend their lives chasing the next best thing that they want, not realizing it's just a crazy cycle that we're in.
It sets the foundation for a foundational decision that we are tasked with making within this range of consciousness that actually will determine the path that we will follow through most of our next layers of consciousness that we will participate in. Okay. When we create this identity, the identity is who we think we are.
Yeah.
And so if we choose to don't have an awakening, and we choose to enhance that identity, then that is the foundation for many of the mental illnesses and behavioral illnesses that we have diagnosed in this range of consciousness. For example, a natural behavioral pattern that emerges from someone who has chosen to enhance that identity as opposed to healing and surrendering that identity begins with narcissism, and actually begins much lower than narcissism. But it will evolve into narcissism, which is really the first diagnosed stage. Personality, all sorts of personality disorders precede that narcissism, but that will evolve into psychopathy and sociopathy as well, which is nothing more than the enhancement of that identity that we create. That behavior will continue into more advanced ranges of consciousness that we will participate in. The alternative is to begin to surrender that identity and heal our false perceptions of self and pursue our authentic self, which emerges. It's there. We don't have to create it. It's already there. We just have to allow it to emerge.
Yeah.
And we have to surrender that identity in order to allow it to emerge.
So you're really outlining our psychological identity, or the chosen constructed self, versus our deeper consciousness,
Right.
our true identity.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you think about how this evolves into personalities or characters that we emulate, that we identify as valuable, and if you make a list of those qualities that we observe in others that we deem to be worthwhile, ethics, morality, integrity, truthfulness, honesty, all those things, you make the whole list. We can be, to a degree, trained in those by our parentage in society, but they're not us. In other words, if we're still promoting this identity, we are adhering to them because of training. But if an instance emerges that allows us to trick the world to get more of what we like by violating those trainings, then we will do so. However, along this service to others path, those that are surrendering and achieve a relative degree of advancement, those become the qualities that are their inherent characteristics of the authentic self. And so they're no longer predicated upon training. The difference is that those along the service to others surrender that perception of separation, and so their consideration of others greatly accelerates, and all of those qualities are predicated upon consideration of others. Yeah. Those following the service to self path don't have that consideration of others because they're self-oriented. And so all of those qualities are variable. We can talk about them and we can profess them, but we don't have to adhere to them in order to still promote the identity that we've created.
Okay. And so where does the stress come in? Like, why does identity maintenance create stress?
Every time that the authenticity of our false identity is challenged, that is something that we don't like. Anything that we don't like is stress.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And so that means most people.
Well, that's the design until we awaken and begin the healing process. And it's still, stress is our teacher. It's teaching us exactly what we need to become aware of and heal within ourselves.
Yeah, it's a catalyst. They use the word catalyst for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Internal pressure or catalyst, yeah. Absolutely. And so let's share with the audience a bit about the groundwork that was laid in reference to these ideas for the work that you do in the world, as well as for your book, and even the terms service to self, service to others. Where do those come from? Let's talk about that.
Well, those are defined a defined decision that we have to make, and the creation is a very busy place. We're not alone. And when I say it's a busy place, I mean it's beyond our comprehension how busy a place that it is.
Indeed.
And it is to greatly simplify that, those individuals choosing the service to self path actually create or constitute about 10% of the population of creation. The other 90% are those that are choosing service to others, the balance of participants in creation. And it is foundational. It is the basic decision that will, the service to others path is considered the direct path back to the Creator, which is the evolution that we're all on. The service to others service to self is considered to be the indirect path, because you will evolve through literally billions of years, what we perceive to be billions of years, until you reach a brick wall. And you can't be in unity and separate at the same time. So you have to choose to surrender all that you've experienced, go back to the starting line and do it again. But you have to do it along the service to others path.
Okay.
So all the concepts, the religious concepts that we have of the devil and Satan and all of that, that's nothing more than that service to self path, and the hegemonies and the interference that they have had in our range of consciousness. When you make that decision and you graduate to the next range of consciousness, we are sustained by a constant flow of what's called intelligent energy, and we require it to continue to participate in creation. It's provided by your higher self, which we can talk about in a little bit, but those choosing the service to others path actually increase that flow of intelligent energy as they evolve up through the densities or the ranges of consciousness. Those choosing the service to self choose to alienate themselves from that flow of energy, but they still have to have it. So they have to find another source for it. Well, our range of consciousness is like Goldilocks' porridge. We have enough energy to make it worthwhile to steal, but we're not smart enough to know we're not supposed to give it away. Okay. And so they interfere consistently in our participation in creation by misdirecting us, lying to us, instituting wars. Every time we have a war, we liberate tons of this energy. And so they have been very active in throughout our entire experience and participation in creation to trick us into giving up this energy to feed them, to keep them in the creationary process.
Yeah, so in a lot of ways, fear of losing kind of that energy or that status or whatever you would call it.
Well, fear is what we release. That's what releases our energy. So every time we feel fear, we'll feel, that's tongue twister, feel fear, they are rejoicing.
Yeah, because that feeds them. And, it's interesting. I remember this aha moment in my 20s when, because usually people would say, and this is, I'm in my 50s now, but people would say back there, well, the opposite of love is hate. And I remember when it dawned on me, or something that I read, and it clicked in that no, the opposite of love is fear.
Yeah.
Everything else comes out of either love or fear.
Yeah.
But the opposite of love is fear. Yeah.
Well, let me throw another one out at you. The only emotion that there is our decision with every experience of whether this experience feels good and I like it, or it doesn't feel good and I don't like it. That is the only emotion that there is. Every other name that we've attributed to emotions are actually conditions of being that we enter into, a vibrational range of energy. So if we're in a condition of grief, for example, it's highly probable that every thought that we process is going to be negatively interpreted.
In that moment, yeah.
In that moment, yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. And so going back to mental health language for just a moment.
Okay.
Ego versus authentic self?
Yeah, same thing. Ego is just another name for identity. It's a hierophant, which is a false perception of self. Identity, if you want to be fancy, you can call it hierophant. If you want to be traditional, you can call it an ego. But it's all the same thing. There's no distinction between them.
Yeah. Okay. And so you talked earlier about awakening and what it truly means, right? That moment where you realize, like, wait a minute, it kind of just begins there. Like, wait a minute. So if someone begins to awaken, what shifts in how they see themselves and their place in the world usually? What's the first? And I've had several layers, I would call it, of awakening since probably age 30. And now I'm 55. So over time, there have been these clusters of moments where I had I would call the next layer
Epiphany.
of
Yeah.
peeling back the onion,
Yeah.
so to speak. And so what are people looking at here?
Well, if you follow the 12 steps, it is a almost perfect blueprint of what we need to do, regardless of addiction or non-addiction, of what we need to do in order to pursue the healing. The 12 steps can be divided in 4 groups of 3 each. The first 3 steps, the first step is that awakening. Is that I'm not happy. They attribute it to alcohol or drugs or whatever, but it's the awakening. All the stuff I've been doing is not making me happier. I'm not happy. And then the next 2 steps are, okay, now what the hell do I do? And it is a process of beginning to further point that awareness inside, the making a deep moral inventory and sharing that with others and admitting it to yourself, all of the resentments, all of the harm that you have perceived to be done to others, is a step-by-step process of continuing to invert that awareness inside, becoming aware of what it is that you are feeling about your perception of self, and healing that. And so it is I teach groups at a mental health hospital, and I'm only with them, for maybe a couple of weeks at most. And so, I teach them about the identity. And then before they depart, I teach them what the 12 steps is actually doing. And I do that because I can't be with them after that point. I can only leave them. I can give them a blueprint. They can go anywhere in the world.
Yep.
And there's a 12-step program. And they can follow that 12-step program and pursue healing without any significant guidance from any one individual. And so I highly encourage people, addiction or no addiction, the process of healing is exactly the same. Addiction is nothing more than a belief that you've included into your identity that it's okay to use that substance. As soon as you take that belief out, then you're through with the addiction.
Indeed. And there have been people who have spontaneously, as they call it, that use that term, healed themselves from addiction because they made a decision in their minds.
Yeah,
they are no longer going to.
That's the way it works for everybody. I mean, you have to make that decision and remove that belief that it's okay to use that substance in order to take it out of the equation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And let's talk a bit about how meditation can be the doorway to some of this awareness.
Okay.
Because you are also a meditation teacher. And I think what's so key is that, and I've definitely gotten a number of my clients over these years of being a therapist to also start meditating, because I have found that enables them to take the things we talk about in therapy and let them sink in. Right. So that they can shift their awareness, shift how they see themselves as the way the divine created them.
Right.
But I find that people who don't meditate, it's a slower process.
Much. Well, I understand that the healing process requires that we learn to invert this awareness. Awareness is what we're tasked with literally becoming in this range of consciousness. It is our discovery tool of what needs to be healed and the healing tool of self. And as I've already discussed, it's directional. While it's pointed outside of us, it perpetuates this experience of stress by virtue of promoting the identity. When we invert it, then that's the beginning of the healing process. Meditation is nothing more than concentrated, inwardly directed awareness. That's all that it is. Most people misunderstand awareness, that it's supposed to be stopping your thoughts. You can't. Yeah, that's not possible. This range of consciousness, we would move out of time if we could stop our thoughts. So I tell my students that almost everybody that comes to meditation is running away from the stick, and the stick hurts. So they're looking for relief from the stick. And if they stay with it long enough, they will get a bite of the apple. And your motivation transforms from running away from the stick to chasing the apple that tastes really good. In other words, I want more of that good feeling, that healing that comes from it.
Yeah.
We exist, we simultaneously exist, you and I and everybody that's listening to this, simultaneously exist in both the metaphysical world and the physical world.
Yes.
Our metaphysical self is our enduring self. That is what is actually accruing all of our experiences from our various lifetimes. And that is the part of us that is eternal, that is in the evolutionary path, or on the evolutionary journey. When we learn to meditate, we're inverting this awareness until we get to a point of healing that we actually visit our metaphysical self. That is in the guru's cave. Right now, you and I are in the village. All problems exist in the village. And so by visiting the guru's cave regularly, it's like having a mini vacation from which you can go back into the village. When you go on vacation, it takes you 2 or 3 days to get out of that workaday world.
Right.
And you get into enjoying your vacation, and then you come back from the vacation. The same problems exist before you went on vacation, but you have a different perspective on those problems because you were different. The same is true when you come out of a meditation and you go back into the village. You've been away from the problems. There are no problems in the guru's cave, so you've had a reprieve in the guru's cave and come out into the village with a completely different perspective. Now, mindfulness is nothing more than learning to take that mindset that you have in the guru's cave with you when you come back into the village. So you no longer are in the problem. You're just experiencing the problems, but not in the problems. They're not of you. And so your whole perspective of the intensity of those problems completely transforms, and your capacity to deal with them or to resolve them or whatever, however you want to reconcile them, is transformed, just like when you've come back from vacation. Meditation itself is a different. Most people think that breathing, watching your breathing, or doing one of several dozen other transformation steps is the meditation. That's to transform you from the village into the guru's cave.
Right.
Once you're there, then stop that. Yeah. Go deeper within yourself with that awareness.
Indeed. I like that analogy. It's beautifully said. Thank you. Yeah. And so I think this is a natural point, because we're talking about meditation to bring in the book, The Law of One, The Raw Contact, because when I first read it during the pandemic, so I was introduced to it by a young spiritual teacher on YouTube who kept mentioning it and the concepts in it. And I was like, what is this book? Because I have not heard of this book. And so this was in 2019. And then, of course, the world shuts down in March of 2020. I went looking for that book. And I read the first volume, the volume that, because now the way they've repackaged it is 2 volumes. So I read the first volume.
Actually, a total of 5.
It's total of 5, right.
Yeah, there are 5, but the 5th is personal information about the ones that were bringing it in. The first 4 are really the meat and the coconut.
Yeah.
And that it is a communication from the entity known as Ra. And they don't disclose in the book, but it was actually Osiris that walked among the Egyptians as Osiris of Ra. And so that's where the myth of Osiris came from in the Egyptian anthologies. But when creation was developed, it was made possible by a series of distortions. The one infinite creator is undistorted, is all that there is. had a desire, and that desire became aware and had the desire to know itself by experiencing itself. Well, if you're all that there is, there's nothing to compare yourself to. So you have no perception of self. And so to begin creation, the one infinite creator projected an analog projection of itself, which was a concept. The only distinction being that the analog projection of itself was perceived itself as separate from the creator, which was a distortion. And that distortion was the first distortion of creation, and it was the first distortion that made creation possible. So that step created the creator as the object, which was the originating one infinite creator, and the creator as the subject, which is the analog projection of the one infinite creator. The analog projection of the creator actually developed creation by duplicating that process into a series of fractals that increased the degree of free will perception. Free will is the perception of separation. And so it increased incrementally the layers of consciousness by incrementally increasing the degree of free will intoxication, because free will acts just like whiskey does. The more you drink, the lower your awareness gets. And you do stupid things you wouldn't do if you weren't intoxicated. Well,
Okay.
free will does the same thing. The more intoxicated that you are with free will, the more you perceive yourself as separate from the creator, and the more stupid things that you do, the more you vary your behavior and activities. So the entire
And that
evolutionary
separateness
process,
also includes separateness from each other.
everything.
Everything.
Actually,
Separate from the planet, from the earth, from one
you
another.
perceive yourself as an autonomous being. Yeah, at this range of consciousness.
Yeah.
And understand that our conventional decisions about free will to turn right or to turn left by choice is only made possible because of that perception of separation. Because if we didn't perceive ourselves as separate, there would be no right or no left to choose from.
Yeah.
So at any rate, the whole process of evolution, the enlightenment path, the journey along the enlightenment path, is surrendering that perception of separation. Sobering from that free will intoxication. As we do that, then we perceive ourselves as being closer to the creator, and we stop doing as foolish things that we do, and more of our creatorness emerges. When we began this conversation, we were talking about the authentic self. The law of one is the one absolute truth of all creation, and that is that everything is the creator. And folks who have a religious background have a lot of difficulty with that. And so I pose the question, in your perception of God, would God be infinite? And almost invariably they'll say yes, and say, what does infinity mean? It means a lot of stuff. No, it means everything. Because if it's not everything, it's not infinite.
And it's not infinity, yeah.
Yeah. And so if it's everything, who are you?
Everything.
You are everything. Yeah. You are the creator. You're the creator experiencing yourself at this range of consciousness. And so understanding that transforms our perception of self. And understand that the numerical value of infinity is one. It's the only infinite number. Any other number is finite.
Yeah.
And so understand that you are the creator experiencing yourself at this range of consciousness. Now the question becomes up, how do you become more of your creatorness? By surrendering this identity and healing from this perception of separation, which allows more of your authentic self to emerge.
Which I believe is where religion started. In the sense that, so my undergrad studies, my degree in my undergrad was in religious studies.
Okay.
One of the things I realized in coming out of that, so I was raised in a fundamentalist Christian household. Parents are ministers.
Okay.
Still got ministers in the family.
Hardcore.
I was hardcore. I was in there. Pentecostal all the way.
Okay.
But when I changed my major in college to religious studies, and it was just one of these things that was like, we have to listen to our inner voice. We have to listen to the urgings, because there's nothing that should have made me want to change my major, right? But there was this urging in my first semester in sophomore year, and I changed it and I listened. I graduated with that degree with a knowing that there was a thread that runs through every religion that I studied that talks about exactly what the Law of One says. And so when I came to the Law of One, I was just like, oh, this is like the book that was written before all the other books in a way.
This is where they got that stuff.
It totally made sense to me. You know, and when they talked about the evolutionary trajectory, by then I was already a yoga teacher and yoga therapist. So I definitely resonated with talking about the chakras and what they're for. And it definitely expanded my awareness of what they're for, because what we're taught in the yoga community is kind of a smaller version of what Ra talks about in reference to the chakras. But all of it made sense to me. And so, yeah, I believe the mystical sides of all the religions still know this truth, but it's all the dogma that has been burying it over the years and over the centuries that has gotten in the way.
Yeah. We're all just walking each other home. That's all we're doing.
That's it.
From different perspectives. Yeah.
Yep. Down different roads.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Indeed. And so this oneness is what we need to be able to come back to in our awareness, to surrender the limiting beliefs and to inhabit and express and live in this oneness.
And when we turn that awareness inside, that's what we find.
Yeah.
I mean, it's within all of us. There's nothing unique about it at all. Our authentic self is the one infinite creator experiencing itself at this range of consciousness. Our identity is our distortion of that.
Indeed. Indeed. And it almost feels like humanity is trying to dig its hole deeper into identity. And I feel like all the other entities and other galaxies are watching us going, what are they doing down there?
We are the Super Bowl. We are being watched most intensely to see what we do. We are at a crux point in our evolution. Yeah.
It feels that way.
And it's been understand that the this decision-making process of choosing to service to self as service to others requires a certain degree of awareness.
Yeah.
And as a population, we have been very slow to awaken and evolve, but there are lots of reasons for that. But that notwithstanding, Earth is considered to be a second chance planet, which means everybody here that is in the process has failed from at least one other effort to graduate. And so we're kind of a reform school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So we're learning by the hardest.
Man. So what does it actually take for people to surrender their beliefs and their identities? So, that really define their lives so that they can step into this identity that emerges that clearly rings about oneness, rings to the oneness.
First of all, understanding what the game is very important. If you had never seen a football game and somebody took you to a football game, you wouldn't enjoy it because you don't know what the hell is going on down there on the field.
Right.
And the same is true with life. We have failed to remember what the design is, and that's why the purposes of the instruction from Ra, and that's what my book is all about, that you had alluded to, is helping people understand how to play the game and what the game is. And when
Mm-hmm.
you understand that, then that gives you perspective and gives you know pretty much what you need to do because all the answers are within you.
Yeah.
But what we need to do is back away from modernity because the gadgets that we keep creating for ourselves distract us from interacting with other people. And it's through
Mm-hmm.
that interaction that we receive the information that we need in order to heal ourselves. We
Mm.
learn about ourselves in relation to people, places, and things. We perceive we're learning about other people and things, but we're not. We're learning about ourselves in relation to them. And that's an important step in understanding because that brings that awareness inside, and you begin to become aware of those things that we individually have created that perpetuate our experience of stress and our unconsciousness.
Okay. It's interesting that you mentioned the gadgets. I see that, the distraction. I was out not long ago with my partner in a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
We sat down, we placed our order, and a young couple comes in and sits down to the right of us. And the waitress comes over and I guess takes their order. She walks away and they both whip out their phones
Immediately. Yeah.
and they didn't say a word to one another.
Yeah.
I tapped my partner and I was like, you see this? Literally. They didn't say anything. The food arrived. They said a few words. They ate and then they whipped their phones back out. I was like,
Right.
you could have stayed home for that.
Exactly. That's what DoorDash is for. Yeah, you don't need to
Exactly.
go. Yeah. It was
So
funny you
yeah,
say
I'm
that.
seeing the
The other night we were out to dinner, and then two couples came in of young people came in, and they sat
hmm
down at a table near us, and the guys immediately whipped out their phone as soon as they sat down, but the women talked, and
Ah.
yeah, and so I'm sure they had a lot more enjoyable time than the guys did, but
Mhm.
they were still with the guys, so the fault's on them too.
Indeed. Indeed. Yeah. I find it fascinating. All the gadgets that we have and the ways that I know I try to resist the gadgets. I seem to have a losing battle though, because,
Well,
oh,
the Arcturians tell us that the happiest people, the people that are doing well with their evolutionary process, are
mhm.
the we would call them tribes around the world that still exist that are
Yeah.
not connected to the internet, and they still function as a unit, and they
Yeah.
teach each other, they help each other, and they guide, and their happiness level is so much higher than we who exist in quote unquote the civilized world
hmm
because of all of the walls that we built and the gadgets that we've created and so forth.
Absolutely. And I think from country to country, even in the westernized cultures, there's a difference. So, living and growing up here in the States, I grew up in New York City, which was
Mhm.
one of the fastest moving cities in the world. And switching, eventually moving here has definitely, I'm in Maryland, just outside of DC, slowed my pace just enough.
Mhm.
But last year, my partner and I spent 2 weeks in Italy, just traveling around Italy, and he remarked, and I found it fascinating. He said, when we got back, you slowed down to a pace that I've never seen you slow down before.
When you were on that trip.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, Italians don't rush.
Yeah.
So eventually, within a few days, I just adjusted my pace to the way they do things there because they move
We do.
slower.
We feel that energy and we
Yep.
adapt accordingly. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a wonderful, relaxing vacation for that reason.
That's good. That's good. That's what you hope for.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. And so, yeah, I think tapping in to spaces where we can do that. I live in a townhome and I have way more space and outdoor space than I had in my condo, which condo is where I was in the pandemic. Was not happy about that. But as I'm getting older, I'm realizing I want gardening space.
Yeah.
I want more space outside to put my hands in the dirt and to grow things.
Right. Yeah. Just feel the earth, because you feel better when you feel the earth.
Absolutely. It allows me to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. But tribal cultures, they still have it. And most people think of them as backwards. I'm like, no, I think they've got it.
I agree, and that's what the Arcturians express to us, that they're much more advanced than what we are in the more civilized world.
Oh, yes. We are so civilized that we're going to try to blow up the planet eventually. That's what it seems like.
that service to self.
Yeah.
Influence.
Indeed.
We still have a large, most of in order to make service to self work, you have to dominate and subjugate.
Mm-hmm.
And so consequently, every time that you see dominating and subjugating behavior, that's a pretty good indicator that that's led by service to self individuals.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And so I would imagine in this day and time, in our modern society, it takes courage along with the awareness to make this shift, would you say?
Well, awareness is what allows it. Certainly, it takes experience. And I use the analogy, the healing is kind of like a pee-wee baseball team. If you ever watched a pee-wee baseball, these little guys or girls that are just starting to play sports, and they're in they're teaching them how to play the game, and they tell them, you want to get on base, and you want to get on first base, and if you get on first base, you want to stay there because you're safe on first base. So they hit the ball or whatever, they get down to first base, and they're safe. They're sitting there on first base, and then the first base coach starts yelling at them, say, "You got to go to second." And they're looking at the coach, "What? I'm safe here. Why do I want to go to?" Yeah. And so they'll berate them enough that they'll try to stretch, put one foot on first base, and they'll try to stretch down to second. Well, you can't do that. So finally they reach that point where they'll take their foot off and they run down to second, and they make it. And so they do that 2 or 3 more times.
Yeah.
They've transferred from being hopeful that they'll make it into having faith that they'll make it. And then you can't stop them from running down there. That's just the reverse opposite. Healing is exactly the same process. We perceive ourselves to be this identity. And so surrendering this identity is scary. If I'm not who I think I am, then who the hell am I? I haven't experienced that authentic self yet. And so you have hope based on what other people have told you and or demonstrated to you, which is a significant difference. You begin to surrender just a little bit. You take your foot off first and you run down to second and say, well, that wasn't so bad. No, I'll do it again. And then you try again and you develop faith that what you're doing is actually making you feel better because you're experiencing greater happiness.
Yeah.
But it's only fear that keeps us from healing because it's our perception of self, who we think we are.
Yeah. Indeed. And people will hold on to fear because it's what they know.
Oh, it may not be comfortable, but you're right. It's what they know. And the old saying that we stay the same until the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change, and then we change.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be that way, but for most people, that's how it works.
Absolutely. I think it's somehow wired because we even see it with children. When I was in my earliest part of career and was a case manager and not yet a therapist, working with families, you would see kids who were in abusive homes and say a social worker had to go to the home to remove the child would not want to go.
Right.
Right? Even though in that home they were subjected to so much abuse, but it's what they knew.
What they knew. It's all they knew.
And these were the people they knew.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. Familiarity breeds consistency. Yeah.
Yeah. Very much so. Very much so. So, yeah. So perhaps awakening isn't about becoming someone new, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's more about releasing everything that isn't really you.
Distortions of perception.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Because when we release the old stories that really confine us, then we begin to remember who we truly are.
Well, we begin to experience it
Yeah.
because, we perceive awareness and we perceive love to be an emotion. And it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a commodity. It's not
Yeah.
something that we can give or receive. Every time that we've felt love in our lives, it's not because we've gotten anything from anybody else other than
Mm-hmm.
permission to surrender this identity. And we've felt so comfortable that I'm going to surrender that and feel my authentic self.
Yeah.
Because your authentic self is the love that you seek.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so the experience and the understanding of that's what you're experiencing is significant in accelerating one's willingness in order to surrender this false perception of self.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. All right. So I would say then to the audience, the real invitation is, who would you be if you stopped protecting the identity you've built and allow your deeper design to emerge?
Mm-hmm.
That's the question I would leave for the audience. Yeah.
The old saying, when you have a significant decision to make, listen to your heart rather than your head.
Mm-hmm.
Well, listening to your heart is listening to your authentic self.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Beautifully said. Thank you, Dean, for this conversation. It has been wonderful.
I've enjoyed it tremendously.
Good. I'm glad. This is exactly why I created the expansion room. Was to have these conversations. Real transformation doesn't begin with new strategies, new plans. It just begins with the willingness to look honestly at ourselves and how we've been performing rather than being our authentic selves.
And that's an important statement that you just made. We perceive that we want love. What we actually want is intimacy.
Yes.
And intimacy is nothing more than being absolutely, positively honest. And you begin by becoming absolutely honest with yourself and surrendering those beliefs that perpetuate that false perception of self. And you have to be intimate with yourself before you can be intimate with anyone else.
Indeed. So true.
Yeah.
So true.
So the rewards multiply as we make progress in our healing journey.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thanks for joining me today. Where can people get in touch with you?
I have a website. The initial D, Dean Graves, all one word, no spaces or anything, .org. And it has all my books listed there. Has the podcasts that I do listed there. It has contact information for counseling services. And I focus primarily on traumas. Traumas actually are just the extreme stress ranges. And the methods that I've been taught by a very brilliant psychologist, heal traumas in 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So, I do public speaking whenever asked, and I try to provide whatever service people need in order to advance themselves along the enlightenment path.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thanks again. And to the audience, if something in this conversation stirred something in you, I would love to hear about it and invite you to go deeper. Feel free to also like and subscribe on whatever platform that you're listening or watching, and leave a review, especially about this particular episode. I read them all, so definitely don't hesitate. And until next time, keep doing the inner work. The world really, really, really needs the real you at this time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It's been delightful.
Thank you.